This country has been at war for over 90% of its entire existence. And you're probably asking, what country are we talking about? You guessed it, the USA. Out of its 239 years of history, 222 of them had US soldiers somewhere on this planet, fighting and dying. But here's the question that rarely gets a straight answer. Why? Is it really about freedom and democracy? Or are there other forces at play? Today, we're following the money, tracing the pattern, and asking, what if it never had to be this way? Now, before you say, this is just another history lesson, it's not. What we're doing today is different. We're going war by war, and each time we're asking one simple question, who benefited? Because when you pattern emerges, the same names, the same industries, the same interests, showing up again and again across completely different wars, completely different decades. And by the end of this video, we're going to ask something even bigger. What would America and the world actually look like if none of this ever happened? Stick with me, because what you're about to see is going to change how you look at American history forever. Let's start at the beginning. World War I, 1914. Europe is tearing itself apart and America is watching from a distance. President Woodrow Wilson even won his re-election campaign in 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But then, just 1 year later, America was in it. So, what changed? Here's something worth noting. Before America ever fired a single shot, JP Morgan, one of the most powerful banks in the country, had already loaned $2.3 billion to Britain and France. That's billions. In 1917 money. Now consider this. What happens to that money if Britain and France lose the war? It disappears. So, America having a financial interest in making sure the Allies won is worth understanding. And it wasn't just the banks. Arms companies like DuPont were already selling weapons and explosives to the Allies before America even officially entered. When the US finally joined, DuPont's profits tripled. The war presented as protecting democracy also turned out to be very, very good for business. As if the first one wasn't enough. Here comes World War II. The war America loves to call the so-called Good War. The war where America swooped in and saved the world from Hitler. And look, the heroism of the soldiers who fought is real, and it deserves respect. But let's look at what was happening behind the scenes. Because while Hitler was rising to power in the 1930s, some of America's biggest companies maintained business ties with Nazi Germany. Ford, GM, IBM, Standard Oil all had operations, contracts, or dealings with the Nazi regime. And that's not even the most documented part. IBM's punch card technology was used to help organize and track Jewish people during the Holocaust. And trust me, that story deserves its own video, so stay subscribed. Let that sink in. And Standard Oil was sharing fuel technology with Nazi Germany, even after America officially entered the war. But here's the bigger picture. America entered World War II officially in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. But by then, they had already been supplying weapons to Britain for a year through something called the Lend-Lease Act. Britain was an important economic partner, and when the war finally ended, America didn't just come out ahead morally. It came out ahead economically. Unemployment dropped from 15% to almost 1%. The arms industry collected over $180 billion in government contracts. And the United States emerged from the ashes of World War II as the most powerful economic and military force the world had ever seen. The so-called Good War was also a very profitable one. After World War II, America didn't slow down. It shifted gears. Enter the Cold War. No direct fighting this time. Instead, America and the Soviet Union competed through other countries, proxy wars. And the biggest and most devastating of those proxy wars was Vietnam. 58,000 Americans died. Hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese civilians died. And for what? The official answer was simple: stop communism from spreading. But in 1971, something significant happened. A government analyst named Daniel Ellsberg leaked secret government documents that became known as the Pentagon Papers. And what those documents revealed was striking. Internal assessment suggested the US government had reason to doubt the war in Vietnam could be won, yet the conflict continued. But here's the question we always ask: who was making money? Dow Chemical supplied napalm and Agent Orange, chemical substances used extensively in Vietnam. Their profits soared. A construction company called Brown & Root got hundreds of millions in contracts to build US military bases across Vietnam. That company later became part of Halliburton, the same company that would show up again in the next war we're going to talk about. The same names, the same industries, just a different decade.
Fast forward to 1991. Iraq invades Kuwait. And America goes to war again. The official reason this time, liberating Kuwait and protecting the region from Saddam Hussein. But here's some important context. Throughout the entire 1980s, America had been supplying and supporting Saddam Hussein. Weapons, intelligence, political backing. The same leader they opposed in 1991 had received significant American support just 10 years earlier. Meanwhile, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia sit on top of some of the largest oil reserves on the planet. The ground war lasted just 100 hours. But the US military established a long-term presence in the region. Permanent bases were set up in Saudi Arabia. And according to his own statements, those bases, sitting in one of Islam's holiest lands, became one of the cited reasons Osama bin Laden declared hostility toward America. The decision to maintain that presence had consequences that extended far into the future. And Halliburton collected contracts to support U.S. military operations throughout. The same Halliburton connected to Brown & Root from Vietnam. The same industries. Present again.
To show you, there's a
fire burning in the World Trade Center right now. We're just hearing about that right now. Let's see if we can get a
We're trying to get you video of it.
And then came September 11th, 2001. The day that changed everything. Nearly 3,000 Americans died in the most devastating attack on U.S. soil in modern history. And the world watched as America prepared to respond. The invasion of Afghanistan had a clear stated objective. That's where Al-Qaeda was operating, that's where Osama bin Laden was hiding. But then in 2003, with disputed evidence, no confirmed connection to 9/11, and against the advice of many allies around the world, America invaded Iraq. The reason presented to the public: Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear capabilities. The threat was presented as real, urgent, and undeniable. But the weapons were never found. Not a single one. The intelligence that formed the basis of the justification was later widely questioned. Now let's look at the financial picture. The Vice President of the United States at the time was Dick Cheney. Before becoming Vice President, Dick Cheney was the CEO of Halliburton. After the invasion of Iraq, Halliburton and its subsidiaries received over $39 billion in war contracts. $39 billion. For construction, logistics, oil infrastructure. And Halliburton wasn't alone. Private military companies like Blackwater received billions more. The Iraq War cost America $2 trillion in total. And Iraq, just like Kuwait before it, sits on one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Osama bin Laden was eventually found not in Iraq, not in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan. A U.S. ally. Over 200,000 Iraqi civilians died according to documented estimates. And the region has faced ongoing instability since. The same financial pattern. The same industries. A much larger scale.
So let's stop for a second, because by now you've probably started to notice something, a pattern. Let's lay it out clearly. World War I, JP Morgan's loans were at stake. Arms companies like DuPont tripled their profits. World War II, American corporations had financial ties with Nazi Germany while the war was being fought. The war pulled America out of a depression and positioned it as the world's dominant economic power. Vietnam? Internal documents showed doubts about the outcome, yet the conflict continued. Dow Chemical and Brown and Root, later Halliburton, made billions. Gulf War, America had supported Saddam Hussein for a decade, then went to war when he moved against oil-rich Kuwait, and maintained a military presence afterward. Iraq, a conflict based on intelligence that was later found to be inaccurate, fought in a country with no confirmed link to 9/11, where the sitting vice president's former company received $39 billion in contracts. In each case, the public justification centered on freedom, democracy, and protection. And in each case, significant financial gains followed for specific industries. In 1961, before Vietnam, before the Gulf War, before Iraq, President Dwight D. Eisenhower gave one of the most historically significant farewell addresses ever recorded. He specifically warned about what he called the military-industrial complex, the growing financial relationship between defense contractors and the government. He said Americans should guard against its undue influence. Today, the United States spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. There are over 800 American military bases spread across more than 70 countries around the world. And since its founding, America has never gone more than 20 consecutive years without military engagement somewhere. These are the documented facts. What conclusions you draw from them is up to you.
Now here's where I want you to use your imagination for a minute. Because we've followed the money. We've seen the pattern. But now I want to ask, what if? What if America had never set up permanent military bases in Saudi Arabia after the Gulf War? No bases on Holy Land. No stated grievance for Bin Laden. A different chain of events going forward. Just, what if? What if the $2 trillion spent on Iraq had instead been directed inward? The United States has millions of people without access to proper healthcare. Crumbling bridges and roads. Schools that can barely afford basic supplies. What could $2 trillion have done for those communities? And that's just one conflict. Since September 11, 2001, America has spent over $8 trillion on military operations, veteran care, and homeland security related to the war on terror. $8 trillion. Think about what $8 trillion could have built, could have funded, could have changed. Now I'm not suggesting America should never protect itself. And I'm not saying the world would be a perfect place without US military involvement. International relations are complicated. There are no simple answers. But when the same industries appear in the financial records of war after war, when the public justifications shift but the contracts remain consistent, when the human cost is enormous and the financial gains are concentrated, these are questions worth asking. Who makes these decisions? And who benefits when they do? So here we are. We started with a number, 222 years of war out of 239. And we've followed that number all the way through history. Through the banks of WW1. Through the corporations of WW2. Through the documents of Vietnam. Through the oil of the Gulf War. Through the contracts of Iraq. And everywhere we looked, the same financial pattern appeared. Now I want to be clear about something. The soldiers who fought in every single one of these wars, they believed in what they were doing. They were brave. They were real. Their sacrifices were real. This video is not about them. This video is about the documented financial interests that surrounded each conflict. Because here's what the numbers show. A country that has been at war for 90% of its existence is not simply reacting to the world. Patterns like this reflect decisions. Decisions made by people. People with interests. People with money. People with power. The real question isn't why America goes to war so much. The real question is, who gets to decide? And who benefits when they do? I'll leave that with you. If this video made you think, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think. Subscribe, because we're just getting started. Until the next video, goodbye.